that are allowed on that. Because it is all GitHub based, technically a student could manually go to GitHub and sort of bypass Classroom 50 to invite students, but you would know if that were to happen because we'll collect that information when submissions are collected. There's a question, what is the estimated minutes usage per student? It ultimately depends on how many times each student chooses to submit. Every submission will be associated with a GitHub Actions run. But in the example that I showed you in the slides earlier, where it was really like a Python file that students were writing and like maybe 5 to 10 Python unit tests that are running against it, those GitHub Actions ran in like 30 to 40 seconds each. So that was sort of the estimated time for one submission.
And just to add that, it really depends on how complex the assignment is, of course, and how complex your auto grader will look like. And of course, I believe we could add a feature that just to, if you will, you can just disable, I guess, auto grading by default if you want to consume the 3,000 action minutes limit. And if you rather prefer trigger like a auto grading in the end, I think that's also doable. But by default, it's on by default. So student submit would trigger an auto grading, like a GitHub action workflow, which usually runs 10 seconds if you don't specify anything.
There's a question, how do we define our own grading scripts? Can these scripts use external libraries? The answer is yes, you can use sort of any technology you'd like. If you're going to write your own grading script inside of the Classroom 50 configuration repository that you'll get when you set up the organization, for the first time, you can push a custom file that will act as the autograder. And if you push your custom autograder, that will override our default autograder that we would normally use. And that custom autograder is just a script that can do whatever you'd like, use any dependencies you'd like.
And just to add that, I guess what I want to stress here is we just provide you a way of recreating GitHub Classroom, if you will. Certainly, you can do things the way you want. You don't even need to follow our naming convention as long as all the pieces is moving the way it should be, as if you will, it will work. But the way we architect this is to also provide as much as flexibility as possible so that you don't need to modify that much file. So for autograder, I think the easiest approach personally is if you use a Docker approach, then you can just specify a container point to an image that you author and then run a script inside the container. That might be the easiest to set up whatever runtime environment you want. I think someone talked about would due date or late submission supported. Why not, I guess? I mean, we could have that metadata and then visualize that on the GUI side. That's fine. But again, this is assuming you are using all our tooling. Then yes, there will be some due date feature. This is. So the latest question asks, is there a way to automate pushing changes to all student repository for an assignment? Yes, we could do that through GitHub Classroom. Through the GitHub Action workflow. So yes, that's a way. But right now, we don't have this so-called feature added to our own solution. I guess this is a concern when you have distribution code changes, then it might be a feature for you, right? So if you change your distribution code, you want it to get pushed to all the students' repository, then I envision there will be a feature that called basically update student assignment repo. Then we would just use GitHub Action to push the latest changes to the assignment repo. But I think we would rather avoid doing this because what if student already working on the assignment down deep? If you change that, might not be ideal.
There's a question about whether we use forking for student repositories, and the answer is no. What students get is not a fork. They get a new repository that just so happens to start off with the contents of whatever the template repository is.
So one question asked about one org for the whole school. I mean, this is really about how you organize your course. We architect one org for a teacher, where one teacher can teach multiple classes. That's why we architect this like this. But you can certainly use one org for just one class if you want to keep things clean, or you can use one org for your entire school if you are the school administrators, then you can also do that. But be mindful that the team plan only comes with 3,000 action limits. So if you have so many classes going on concurrently, it might exhaust that 3,000 limits quickly.
Can you use an existing org with GitHub Classroom, or with Classroom 50 if you already have one or your university provides one? Yes, you can use any GitHub organization as long as you, the teacher, are an owner of that organization. You do need owner permissions to do some of the configuration, but as long as you're an owner, it can be an existing org or a new one.
And also make sure that org is on the team plan. But we recommend if you could also start fresh. Because if you have existing or have so many assignment repo, but then if you run a new course, just there's a risk running into conflicts in repo creation. That's all. Because some student might be able to change the GitHub username, and then the other student claim the previous student's GitHub username, then you might end up having conflicting repository naming. It is possible, but.
There's a question about like passing along a template for like a classroom between semester, between different teachers. We have not yet built support for that. It's something we're definitely thinking about, and we're trying to consider what the best way to do that is. In the meantime, what you can do is you can take every classroom is really implemented as just a folder inside your configuration repository. And so if you take just the like assignment configuration from that folder, you can copy that into a new classroom yourself. But we are looking at trying to come up with more automated ways of achieving the same thing.
So the latest question asks about if a grade is tied to a commit, what happens if a user changes the commit after that time? What does that? You mean if the student force push, the commit will be there. The commit will not be gone. Even though student force push, the commit will exist forever. So it's still tied to that commit. This is, I think, is more of a logistic side of thing. Okay. Yeah, we did not build the feature. So there's a question about, is there a way to archive all the repos from a semester and stop access? Sure, we could have a script or some action workflow again, just to automate this process. I imagine you can offboarding like student from a roster. Like if you're done with this cohort, you can just remove them from the org. We can certainly have a script automate this, just so you don't need to do that manually.
There's a question about GitHub Pages and autograder feedback. Just to clarify, the autograder feedback doesn't happen via GitHub Pages. It happens via a GitHub release. So a release is created in the student's repository, and that has the feedback from the autograder in both a human readable format and a machine readable format. GitHub Pages we use behind the scenes just to take care of making student-facing information available to the student web interface and the CLI tools. But you and the student never need to worry about or ever visit those GitHub pages. That's all taken care of behind the scenes by Classroom 50.
So the latest question, just to confirm, what student info will be collected and stored on Classroom 50? We don't collect anything. The Classroom 50 tooling we are talking about is a solution. If you are using this solution, we are just have a command line tool. Our command line tool doesn't store anything at all. Underneath the hood is running a bunch of Git command for you. You could certainly recreate the whole experience by just running raw Git command yourself. So again, we are not collecting anything. Nothing is stored on our side. It is stored on in your organization's config repo. Even though we name it Classroom 50 config repo, but nothing is tied back to us. We cannot even see your org or the content of your org.
And if you were asking like what is stored in that Classroom 50 repo that you have access to, the answer to that is student data like the students' GitHub usernames and the students' GitHub IDs, plus the like commits that students have made and the auto grading scores that students received on those commits. All of that data will end up in your Classroom 50 repository, but that's the only place that data lives. A few questions around like late submissions and how to deal with submissions that come in after a deadline, like penalizing late submissions via the autograder. That's not something that currently exists, but certainly would welcome feedback on that in terms of what workflows have worked well for you, and we can think about if there's a good generalized solution there.
There's a few solutions in the chat, I think, to this that other people are saying they're using already. So I do recommend you go through the chat. There's some people that block force pushes from students. You can tag submissions. You can sort of set up a rule set to not merge certain things. So there, it looks like there's some ways that folks are doing this. Just wanted to call that out to just scroll up to see if there's other folks that have your solution. Looks like there might be.
There's another question concerning FERPA, saying that you are giving permission to us into the org. Just to clarify, we are not getting anything. All this is tied to you. If it's any FERPA concern, it should, I guess, with GitHub, because everything is stored on the GitHub. We didn't see any of this. We are just provide you a solution or command line for you to use.
The one thing you do need to use our web interface at classroom50.org is that we do have like an OAuth application set up where you do like authenticate with that. And that is one that we have configured. But if you would rather, for privacy reasons, not do that, if you would rather use your own GitHub OAuth application, you can certainly create your own and then run our web front end locally, because that will be entirely open source. So if you would prefer to do it that way, that's totally available to you too, and it will work just as well.
Any other question that we did not answer? Yeah, if there's a further question or tooling related question, feel free to post it in the discussion. In fact, that might be helpful to inform what feature we should build or what things should be working differently. But at the end of the day, it's all GitHub, so feel free to create your own solution as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, one of the reasons it is open source is to encourage contributions. I think between now and July 1st, like our plan is just to try and get it in a ready state so we can ship out a version 1. But from there, we would be more than happy to have discussions, take contributions, and sort of continue to improve this kind of tooling to make it better for you and for other teachers and students too. There's a question about anything in the tools to help with running student submissions through Moss. Not directly. All you would need for that would be to be able to like download students' repositories. So you would just want some automated way of like cloning all the student repositories. That's not built into Classroom 50 right now, but you could at least get like a list of all the student repositories and then write a script that clones them all, for example. But not something we've built into the tool currently.
I mean, to fit in our context, that to me is another autograder of test. Then if you author all these logics in the autograder and you use that as an autograder, then it will work. Yeah, the compare 52 is academic honesty tool, I guess, we use to run checks on student submission, but it's not built into Classroom 50. And again, this would be very action intensive, as I figured. But certainly it's a way of auto grading at the end of the day. So if you can do it through GitHub Action, then it's doable with Classroom 50.
If we've missed any of your questions by having answered some verbally and some via chat, please do just copy paste them again into the chat, or as we've noted in the GitHub discussions page for just Classroom 50.
When will the graphical interface be available for testing? It is available now. If you go to classroom50.org, you can try out the graphical interface. Again, some things about the configuration may change before July 1st. So on July 1st, you may need to recreate your organization setup. But if you'd like to test it, give us some feedback, report any bugs you find. We know there are some bugs that we're still working through before July 1st, but would certainly welcome any feedback before then too.
And again, just to follow up, please try our tool, and we appreciate your feedback, but I recommend you create a new org and test our tool, because our configuration for sure will change. Like, in fact, we are receptive to, feedback, and normally we see it's quite trivial to make the decision. We will actually tweak the tool like in a day or two. So do expect we iterate quite quickly. So if your org is set out like today, maybe 2 days later, we might change to some other config. So do expect there's lots of changes. So I would recommend you just create a test org and try our tool.
Indeed. Ultimately, we just want to get feature parity as close as we can to the Classroom for everyone to actually teach their classes. But the longer term hope is indeed to have everything be freely available as open source, so that the features you've always wished existed in GitHub Classroom can now in Classroom 50 if you'd like to request or PR your own code. With regard to GitHub API rate limits, short answer, always. I mean, I do think we'll bump up into frictions with larger classes in particular. So we will have some defenses against that, whether it's throttling or pagination or the like. But for smaller classes, that should be less of a concern.
And maybe I can comment on the API rate limit. So by default, each user get 5,000 API call per hour, and it's like a rolling window thing. And we also being conscious about API rate limit. So the way we design all these action workflow is, at the end of the day, it just generate or create like a JSON file, right? So the GUI was basically reading this JSON file one at a time. So I would say if you frequently use the GUI, if I have to guess or hallucinate here on the spot, it's like 100 API call maybe per, I don't know, half an hour or 15 minutes. But even in that scenario, you won't hit the 5,000 rate limit. So I think that should be fine.
All right, well, if questions are slowing down, maybe we'll officially end our session here, but certainly if you have questions that come up after the session, you think of something later, let us know via the discussion forum, and more than happy to talk about the features, talk about feature requests or bugs, and answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, I have saved all those links too for all the forums and things like that, so folks can find them in the Teacher Toolbox repo, where we're hosting like all of the links that are shared. So it'll be there in perpetuity as well.
Yeah, thanks so much, Morgan, for having us, and for GitHub for making all this possible underneath the hood.
I'm so glad that folks got a chance to see what y'all are cooking up. And I think people are really excited about it. So thank you all for joining us today. Yeah, yeah, I guess if questions are slowing down, I'll collect any other questions, and those could be addressed to the forum. And we'll have Jacqueline, our principal product manager, who's helping 50 Foundation and Codio overseeing the transition. She'll be available a little later on today in our applier learning hours as well, so you can ask her a couple of questions, or GitHub education folks about transition timelines and things like that. Thank you all so much again. And y'all feel free to hop off. We will have a big, nice lunch break for everyone. And then this room will open up again in the afternoon around 3 p.m. for Applier Learning Hours. So we'll have the team again. You'll have your favorite PJ back again. We'll have some campus experts if you'd like to ask any students who are leading student communities some questions. And again, we'll have some folks on there from the product team to talk you through any questions you might have potentially about some of the transitions that we're doing. So thank you all again. And that concludes sort of our morning/early afternoon session. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.